Welcome everyone to today's mini lecture explainer. I'm your language assessment lecturer, and today we're diving deep into the appendix of Aik Pakiti's 2025 book, Language Testing and Assessment. We're going to unpack some actual real-world assessment systems to see how all those theoretical principles we always talk about actually operate out there in the wild.
As a postgraduate TESOL student, I am so ready for this. I mean, reading about validity and reliability is one thing, right? But seeing how they actually function in high-stakes and low-stakes tests, that's kind of a missing link for me.
Absolutely, and as an early career language teacher, I really need to know how these tools work on the ground. I'm constantly having to make decisions about which tests to use, so connecting Pakiti's theory to the reality of my classroom is going to be a lifesaver. Now, quick heads up before we jump in, tests change. Developers are always tweaking things based on new data or tech, so the specific formats we're covering were accurate at the time of the book's writing in 2025.
Right, they're always updating their algorithms or shifting question types.
Exactly. But while the exact number of questions might shift around a bit, the foundational principles of assessment design, like the constructs they measure and the quality standards they're aiming for, those remain constant.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we've got a real-world scenario. Then we'll dive into diagnostic testing with the DELNA. After that, we're looking at adaptive tech through the DT and OPI kick, contrasting specific versus general proficiency tests, and finally we'll wrap up with a critical reflection. Let's get right into it.
All right, Section 1, the real-world scenario, choosing the right assessment.
Okay, let's start with a scenario I literally face every single term. I get a new batch of incoming students, and I have to select an assessment to figure out where they are. But I'm completely caught between wanting a deep, authentic assessment of their communicative abilities and the harsh reality that I have very limited time and almost zero budget.
Oh, that's the classic tug of war, isn't it? It perfectly connects back to those theoretical frameworks from Chapter 4. You're trying to balance practicality, the cost and time, with construct validity and authenticity.
So here is the big question. How do we actually choose the right test for specific student needs while balancing those academic theories and practical constraints?
It's super tough. I mean, how do established tests operationalize their intended purpose when faced with those exact same limitations?
Well, that is exactly what the appendix of the book illustrates. To answer this, we're going to apply the upcoming real-world examples directly back to your incoming student dilemma, looking at how major testing organizations actually navigate these trade-offs. Which brings us to Section 2, Diagnostic Testing, featuring the DELNA. This is the Diagnostic English Language Needs Assessment, developed by the University of Auckland. It's a really brilliant example of a post-entry, low-stakes diagnostic test.
Diagnostic tests are actually fascinating because, unlike placement tests that just sort students into broad levels, diagnostic tests are specifically meant to pinpoint strengths and weaknesses to provide targeted academic support.
Precisely. It's all about finding out which admitted students might face barriers in their academic success due to language limitations and then intervening early. Now, the DELNA operates in two distinct phases to maximize practicality. Phase 1 is this quick online screening focusing on academic vocabulary based on the university word list, plus some basic skimming and scanning reading skills.
Ah, okay. So it acts like a filter? If they score well on phase 1, they don't even need to take the rest of the test? For my incoming students, using a filter like that would save a massive amount of time. It completely addresses my practicality constraint.
Exactly. It groups students into those who are totally fine, those who just need some independent study, and those recommended for a deeper diagnosis. Only that last, smaller group moves on to Phase 2, which is the much more time-consuming diagnostic assessment of listening, reading, and writing. What I really appreciate about this, and this quote from Pakiti hits the nail on the head, is that diagnostic testing doesn't have to imply a deficit model. The word diagnostic can sometimes sound a bit clinical, but here it has a strictly formative function.
That is such a powerful pedagogical point. It's not about labeling a student as failing. It's proactively prompting further action to support their learning journey. It bridges the assessment directly to pedagogy, which is exactly what I want from my classroom.
Moving right along to Section 3, Adaptive Tech, looking at the DET and OPI IC.
So the DELNA is great for an institutional level, but what about modern technology? Like, how are internet deliveries and algorithms changing the testing landscape, particularly for someone with limited resources like me?
That's a fantastic question. Let's look at computer adaptive testing and internet-delivered assessments, because technology is radically altering how we collect evidence of language ability today.
So, computer adaptive testing, or CAT, dynamically adjusts item difficulty based on how the test taker is performing in real time. The Duolingo English test, the DET, is a prime example of this mechanism in action.
Right. In the DET, the difficulty of the later sections is actually determined by the test taker's performance on the first 3 sections. Those early sections include things like C-tests and yes-no vocabulary tasks.
Exactly. And this allows the algorithm to pinpoint a proficiency level much, much faster than your traditional linear test. The test gets harder if you answer correctly and easier if you struggle. This significantly boosts its overall practicality. It's actually fascinating to critically contrast the DET with something like the ACTFL OPIKE. If you look at it, the DET is highly adaptive, sure, but it relies heavily on restricted responses, like filling in partial words or speaking for just 30 seconds at a time. Its focus is quite purely linguistic. Whereas the OPIKE, the Oral Proficiency Interview Computer, focuses way more on communicative competence. It's internet-based too, but it uses an avatar to simulate an actual interview, evaluating tasks based on function and context. Yes, exactly! The OPIKE was explicitly developed to solve the practicality limitations of traditional face-to-face interviews, like scheduling conflicts and location issues, while still trying to maintain a strong focus on broader communicative text types.
You know, here is something that totally confuses me about the DET. The oral interview and writing sample sections are actually unscored. They are literally just sent to the receiving institutions. So what is the practical impact of having unscored sections on a high-stakes test like this? Oh, that is a highly debated topic in assessment circles right now. From a test developer's perspective, scoring extended speaking and writing reliably is incredibly expensive and complex, particularly for automated AI systems.
But think about it from a stakeholder perspective. If a university institution receives an unscored video, who is actually evaluating it? Do admission officers even have the language assessment literacy to judge that sample fairly? It raises some major ethical questions about test consequences.
That debate perfectly illustrates how test purpose alters design, which brings us to Section 4, specific purpose testing versus general proficiency testing. Let's pivot and look at how these two models differ.
This comparison on screen is really stark. On one side, we have the Occupational English Test, the OET, which targets highly specific professional domains. Like if you are a nurse or a dentist taking this test, your writing task is to literally write a referral letter based on medical case notes.
And then on the other side, the TOEFL Essentials Test covers general academic and daily life proficiency. It has sections measuring daily life reading right alongside academic listening. So the OET is deeply embedded in a specific context, while TOEFL is much, much broader.
Exactly. As Fakiti's frameworks emphasize, whether a test is designed for English for specific purposes or general academic English dictates its construct validity. The construct we choose to measure completely changes depending on that end context.
I have to say, I am absolutely fascinated by the OET speaking task format. It uses a role-play technique where the interviewer actually acts as the patient. The test taker gets scenario cards, they get 3 minutes to prepare, and then just 5 minutes to perform.
It's incredibly authentic.
Yes, it highly resembles the authentic real-world tasks I try to design for my own specific purpose classrooms. Going back to my scenario from earlier, this is exactly the kind of communicative authenticity I want for my incoming students, even if it might be harder to administer.
And because the task is so authentic, the scoring criteria absolutely must reflect that real-world need. The OET specifically evaluates intelligibility, appropriateness, fluency, accuracy, and choice of language.
So it's not just about grammatical perfection, right? It's really about whether a healthcare professional can safely and appropriately communicate with a patient in what could be a highly stressful environment.
Right. These specific rubrics ensure the test remains valid for its high-stakes purpose, healthcare licensing contexts where miscommunication literally impacts patient safety.
All right, Section 5, critical reflection on testing. Having looked at these real-world operationalized tests, we definitely need to initiate a critical reflection phase. How do these tests actually stack up against the theoretical standards we discussed earlier in the book?
Well, let's quickly review those 7 quality criteria from Chapter 4: validity, reliability, authenticity, practicality, fairness, impact, and ethics. This is the definitive checklist that test developers and test users must constantly balance.
Looking at our examples today, the inherent tension is always between practicality and authenticity. This brings us right back to my dilemma at the start of the term. I desperately want the authenticity of the OET or OPIC roleplays, but honestly, I only have the budget and time for something highly automated like the DET. Absolutely. It's a huge trade-off. The DET leans heavily into practicality. It's super fast and highly accessible via the internet. But it sacrifices some authenticity by using those highly restricted tasks. Meanwhile, the OPIC tries to solve the practicality limits of face-to-face interviews by using an internet-delivered avatar, trying its best to keep the communicative authenticity high.
Which leads me to this critical thinking question for everyone. Do highly restricted, adaptive computer tasks truly capture interactional competence? The sociocognitive models we study argue that interaction is a joint co-construction of meaning. Can an algorithm truly measure that if you are only speaking for 30 seconds to a blank screen? Honestly, it is a massive construct validity limitation. Test designers are actually still searching for robust solutions on how to emulate true, real-life human communication in automated, computer-assisted formats without losing reliability. So, to summarize our core takeaway today, the appendix acts as a practical bridge. As faculty emphasizes in this section, there is no perfect test. There are only careful balances between theoretical ideals and stakeholder constraints. Understanding the mechanics of these operationalized tests empowers us, as educators, researchers, and administrators, to make informed, ethical choices about which tests we use and exactly how we interpret their results.
I want to leave everyone watching with a final, provocative thought. As future language teachers and assessment coordinators, you are going to inherit testing systems. You won't always get to build them from scratch. So how will you apply the theoretical standards we discussed today to critically evaluate and perhaps adapt those assessments in your own classrooms?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? Moving from theory to actual practice.
Well said. Thank you both for this incredibly insightful conversation, and thank you all for joining us on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep evaluating, and we will see you next time.